Good evening to those of you who are in the room and to those of you who are joining shortly. I want to go ahead and get started on time so that we can end on time at 8. Thank you to everyone and welcome to the first of 3 reopening events this summer. My name is Jeffry Burchard. I'm an architect. I'm the curator and host of this series, which the Boston Society for Architecture has been so generous to support. As was the case last summer when we started this series, the idea for the format and focus on new architecture that is opening soon comes from the French word vernissage, which was a term used for a preview of an art exhibition before a formal opening. Last summer, we looked at 6 projects that were mostly new buildings that were then soon to be opened. This summer, and in the spirit of the times, we are focusing on reopenings or buildings that are reopening soon or have recently reopened. That is, we are discussing new architecture that is in or in addition to existing buildings. I want to quickly note that this series is being held in parallel to another series at the Boston Society for Architecture titled Matter and Opinion, Existing Buildings. That series will feature clients and designers in conversation about the challenges, triumphs, and lessons learned from completed existing housing, workplace, and educational facilities. Now back to reopenings, and before I go any further, I want to just give a quick shout out to Danny Solomon, who reprised his role in creating the graphic identity for this series, and also a huge thanks to Caitlin Hart and Billy Craig at the BSA for their help and assistance in putting this together. Following tonight's conversation, we will have another on July 28th with Studio Gang and Millions. And then the series will conclude with Law Dahlman and Cripper Studio on August 4th. This evening, we are joined by Ben Youtz, Andrew Brookes, and Stephanie Randazzo Dwyer. Ben is a partner and Andrew is a designer at designLAB in Boston. designLAB describes their design philosophy as one of critical stewardship, which lies at the intersection of historic preservation and environmentally conscious design, with an emphasis on human-focused decision-making. Stephanie is a partner at Machado Silvetti, also located in Boston. Machado Silvetti is an architecture and urban design firm known for projects that celebrate the distinct characteristics of a place. Whether the project is for new construction, renovation, or addition, their approach leads to designs that are original for their conceptual clarity and visual intensity. At this point, I should also disclose that I'm also a partner at Machado Silvetti, and I also worked on the project that Stephanie is presenting. But I promise for the purposes of this evening, I will be a dispassionate moderator and hopefully simply a facilitator of a conversation between Stephanie and Ben. Each office will have 15 minutes to present a single project. Then we will have about 15 minutes of discussion. And for Ben and Andrew and Stephanie, I will give you each notice at the sort of 10-minute mark that your time is winding down. And for all of those, thank you so much who have tuned in live this evening. Please note that there is a Q&A feature in Zoom in which you can post questions and we will work to answer those and to respond to those. You can post questions at any time during the evening and the panelists will see them. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen now and I'll invite Ben and Andrew to present your project.
All right, very good. Thank you so much, Jeffrey, for having us. You should be able to see my screen now, I hope.
Yes.
As Jeffrey mentioned, I'm a partner at designLAB Architects. My name is Ben Youtz, and Andrew Brookes is here with me this evening. We've kind of been partners in crime on this project for quite some time. It's been a labor of love over many years. We're going to give you a quick introduction to the context of the site, the community, sort of the existing conditions, and then we're going to share a series of construction photos and sort of quasi-finished photos. The timing for this couldn't be more perfect. For this project, it actually had a soft opening earlier this week, and the ribbon cutting will be around Labor Day towards the end of the summer. So for anybody not from the area, I'm sure most of you are, but Somerville is just north of Boston. As you can see here in Davis Square, where this project is located, is just sort of on the western edge of Somerville. Interestingly, around the turn of the century, when this project was constructed, it opened in 1909. Somerville was undergoing immense growth in the West Somerville area in particular, as new streetcar lines were brought to the Davis Square area, and former farmland and pasture were turned into some pretty dense housing. On the map on the right, Davis Square is in the bigger dashed red box, and the smaller dashed box just next to it was one of the last city-owned parcels of land in the area, which was earmarked for the branch library. Here's a pretty grainy photo of the Davis Square area at the time. You can see all the streetcar lines and a number of commercial buildings. The West Branch Library was funded almost entirely through the Carnegie Library Foundation. It was a major philanthropic effort, of course, by Andrew Carnegie. And there was nearly 2,000 libraries constructed across the country through this effort from around 1890 to just before 1910-ish. This library started design in 1906, which was sort of the tail end of that effort. And the West Branch Library itself is just a prime example of the Carnegie model, neoclassical in style, very symmetrical. And it's, little, one might say, cookie cutter. I mean, there's a lot of these libraries scattered across the country. I'm sure you've all encountered them in your travels. Today, Davis Square is a very vibrant community. I'm proud to say I lived there for almost 12 years myself. This was my neighborhood library leading up to its renovation. There's lots of wonderful restaurants and cultural attractions and nightlife, a number of festivals and music concerts. It's a really vibrant community. Like I said, this has been a labor of love. It actually started in 2014, which is kind of hard to imagine, 6.5 years ago. We got through a design process through 2016, and then the project actually went on hold for about 1.5 years as we were trying to negotiate some community feedback in relationship to the size of the building and how much we could build on the site. We picked back up again in 2018 and then started construction in 2019, which took about 2 years to today.
So when we did pick up the library back up after that start, it had continued to deteriorate, and there were a whole host of issues, but the biggest driving issue was the accessibility problems. The library was originally designed with a grand staircase on the exterior and the interior, which was acted as the main entrance, which cut off a significant amount of the community from using it. The exterior of the building was underutilized, and it was mainly used for parking, and there was just a large lawn and very few programs were activated on it. The interior of the library, the programs continued to expand, but they were stuck within their like antiquated compartment or container. And there were small changes that were made over time, paints changes, mostly finish changes, and like additional bookcases and furniture, but all of that continued to age and was really showing its wear and tear over time. The basements was where the children's library was ultimately moved to for the last few decades, I believe. And it's shared space with some of the adult collections, and the only like unique children's space shared ceiling space with large mechanical equipment. So there really wasn't a nice, unique space for the children to work and play. And the second floor was really where the building was showing its wear the most. There were holes in the ceiling where you could see the sky. The most significant element was the skylight, which was actually covered up in the 70s and 80s due to leaks. It was easier to cover it up than fix it. And it was originally designed to be the community gathering space, but it got so hot up there that they actually had to close the second floor for a pretty significant portion of the summer every year. And then those problems continued into the roof. There were abandoned systems, there were leaks. There's multiple kind of layers of roofing that were done to fix problems here and there, but never a wholehearted change.
So our design process was a pretty good one, a pretty fun one. It involved a lot of community input. We had a series of visioning sessions early in the process, understanding what the community members wanted out of their library. And then from that, we derived a series of potential schemes, kind of different levels of intervention, all included a new addition that was really our tool to kind of create this new entry pavilion to get people into the library in an accessible way. And we compared all of those schemes against one another, both size-wise, cost-wise, programmatically, and we ultimately ended on a kind of intermediate scheme that did get some pushback, and we actually had to kind of shrink it up a little bit more, but the overall idea of that scheme prevailed through the end of construction here that Andrew will describe a little bit more here.
Yeah, with that shrunken scheme, we were still able to use all of the programs that the city had requested and wanted in this modern library. And so we added an elevator, which was a significant portion. We had accessible entry, accessible bathrooms, as well as additional bathrooms. The original library only had one bathroom. As you go to the basements, we moved the entire collection to the basement, as well as a new community room, and which also is a makerspace and a classroom. On the first floor, we chose to keep a significant amount of this in its historical qualities. So the front two reading rooms, which are symmetrical, we kept the millwork, kept the fireplaces, kept most of the plaster even, but repainted it. And then we gave the children's library its own space on the second floor, which is entirely unique and designed to help the children's librarian and children's library expand their learning. And then once we started construction, we really started to see the age of this building and the obstacles that it presented. The site was very tight, and adding the addition right to the setbacks made it very difficult, as well as basically having two projects going at the same time, the interior gut renovation and the exterior addition. Adding the elevator was a significant obstacle. We had to underpin about 40% of an existing rubble foundation, which was pretty unimaginable to see. We also had to protect a significant amount of historical elements, including all of the plaster in those historical reading rooms, along with a few outliers like a fireplace in the new rear reading room. Along with protecting all of those elements and gutting the building and building the addition, there were a significant amount of unforeseen conditions, including what you see here on the left is a well that we found under the demoed slab in the basement, which we lowered. We think that this well was originally built when they built the building in 1909 to help the masons access water for the grout, which is really interesting. Unfortunately, we had to fill the well with sand and gravel.
Yeah, so as Andrew mentioned, one of the bigger technical challenges was needling this new elevator shaft. It's only a 3-story building, but we had to underpin the foundation to get this elevator shaft in, and then remove and restructure the floors on each level and the roof as it went up to accommodate that new shaft. Here you can see it poking through the roof to get the headspace created. You can start to see here the volume of the addition taking place. We kind of set the main level of the addition halfway between the lower level of the existing building and the first floor. It's kind of like the split level thing. So we ramp up from the sidewalk and get about halfway up, and then we get into the new addition. This is taken from the lower level, and you can start to see the first floor being framed here. And just a few more shots of the steel being erected to get a sense of the volume on the site.
About 5 minutes, Ben.
Great, thank you.
So once the steel got erected, we really got to start putting the building back together. You can see here that we had a copper facade to complement the new copper roof that we're putting on the building, as well as a masonry veneer wall at the base. New nano wall, foldable wall to open the addition out into the landscape, a significant element in the building that was requested. We also refinished all of the 1909 millwork, so that's all still original, just with a new finish to bring back that shine. Here you can see the children's library with its unique ceiling, new skylight exposed, and new millwork. We also refinished all of the floors on the right, and on the left you can see the stenciling that we had uncovered and then kind of redid for those historic spaces. And then we actually took those existing stencils and modified them and changed them for the children's library to make them a little more fun and a little more playful. We changed the scale, we changed the colors. Here you can see the new addition with its wood slat ceiling, as well as what we call a feature wall on the right, which can hang artwork on, as well as the glazing installed. And then new millwork in the basement with matching ceilings. And we also went through the old tile, which was a unique antique tile that we had to get a special manufacturer for, and we replaced each one of these little 1-inch tiles where they were damaged. Here you can see some of the landscape elements. We had these very large granite blocks to match and complement the limestone, as well as a local quarry provided additional stone, which matched the building stone. And then you can see here the landscape and the building kind of folding together and becoming one. And this was our final photo shoot, which was really exciting to see. And then here's the front entrance and the new accessible walk up to the new pavilion level and addition.
So I'm going to blast through the rest of these pretty quick just to make time here. This is the new entry to that new kind of entry lobby to the pavilion. As I said, it's kind of split level. So you can see some stairs up to the main level. You have access to the elevator that we needled in. And then to the back there's this sort of new informal reading space, community gathering space. Here it is from another view. Here's a new browsing area on the main level. Oops. The stack space downstairs. Some of these are scouting shots because we haven't fully photographed the building. This is the community room and maker space in the lower level. Here's a quick glance at the children's space on the upstairs and some of the restored historic spaces. And one of the fun things that we've done here as we've reached the end of this project is we've actually started to create a video for a virtual opening for the city to use. So we've interviewed the library director, some different librarians, community members. We just did this a couple weeks ago, and we're actually in the process of sort of compiling all of that video content into some medium that they can use to promote the new library and its programs. So here they've actually just started to do, as I said, a soft opening. They're starting to host a few programs here or there. This was a children's program a few evenings ago. And then here, if this cooperates, is a quick video that should give a little bit more of a glimpse of what we were up to. Oops. So that's the end of the show for us. How'd we do, Jeffrey?
You know what? 15 minutes on the dot, I think, to the second.
Excellent.
But more importantly, thank you so much for that wonderful presentation and such a comprehensive overview of the project. I have notes and notes of questions and
good.
thoughts.
Good.
And very curious to hear more. But at the moment, we welcome Stephanie Randazzo Dwyer back, and the floor is yours. We'll all turn our video off now, and I'll give you a shout out with 5 minutes to go.
Okay. Let's see. Can see my screen?
Yes, looks good.
Awesome. All right, well, thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Stephanie Randazzo Dwyer, as Jeffrey mentioned. And a quick shout out to some of my partners in crime, which Jeffrey is one of them. And of course, Jorge Silvetti, who worked on this project, and a few of our alum, Craig and Lucia. I want to thank you because there were probably about 10 or 15 more people that touched this project, but I'll keep going because I know we have 15 minutes. So I'm really excited to talk to you today about the Denver Art Museum's North Building revitalization and expansion. The North Towers were designed by James Sudler and renowned Italian architect Gio Ponti. This was one of Ponti's only, it was his only American commission, and it was the first high-rise museum of its time when it was built in 1971. So we, along with Fentress Architects, completed a complete renovation of the North Towers, along which included about 180,000 square feet. Around 115 of that was new and renovated gallery and education space. And this small little 30,000 square foot addition in the foreground for a new welcome center. The entire project was completed in, let's see, early 2020. It was slated to open that spring, and we are now very excited that it will be actually opening this fall. I just wanted to start really quickly. Our office has had the opportunity to work on a pretty wide range of projects when it comes to working with historical contexts. Everything from straightforward preservation to reuse or introducing new program into an existing building to some contemporary additions. But I think what was so interesting about the Denver project was that it really included a full range within this one project. And there are so many sub-stories to this project, so I'm going to try and just stick to 3 for today and focus really on 3 sort of issues that I think we deal with a lot on projects. One is about reorientation and sort of the ability of renovation or a piece of work to sort of really change the way a visitor experiences the building. And then there's the revitalization piece, which, basically all of the behind the scenes work that it takes to bring a building into the 21st century. And then lastly, a few elements of the project that involve sort of reimagining and recapturing some of the original characteristics of the project that were really never realized. And that's sort of a fun one. I'm going to first zoom out really quickly to give you a little bit of context. Like I said, the project had a ton of sort of sub chapters, but the main 4 were basically the Welcome Center addition, the surrounding grounds, the expansion to the courtyard, and really the adjacency to the public plaza that the campus sat within. The renovation of the towers. I may call them the Martin Building, in between the North Towers and the Martin Building. The Martins were the generous family that gave a pretty great donation for this project. And then lastly, a small addition on the 7th floor of the towers. So those are the 4 main components. So when the towers were built in 1971, the entrance, the iconic sort of tube that you see there, we call it the Ponti tube, was really oriented to the Civic Center at the time, which is this diagonal you're seeing here, and it was oriented to Civic Center Park. And then over the years, in 2009, the Leapskin Hamilton building was built, and this large parking garage was built to the south. And so the sort of center of gravity really shifted for the Denver's campus to the south. And the mission of the new Welcome Center was really to sort of refocus this center of gravity and create a new entrance for the Martin Building. And this is just a view from that new parking garage looking at the North Towers and the south structure in the foreground that was removed for the new Welcome Center. And so the site was chosen in the master plan prior to us, which was located, right along 13th Avenue, in between the Hamilton building on the left and the North Towers here on the right. One quick thing, which was interesting when submitting for the project, they were very specific about the new Welcome Center being a new entrance. And I don't know, for us, it seemed a little strange because there were going to be 3 main entrances for one institution. So the Hamilton building, the Welcome Center, and then the Ponte Tube. But really after starting to work on the project with the client, it was pretty clear that the institution is large enough to support the 3. But I think what became clear to us is that, the clarity of how this was done and sort of continuous visitor flow became a real priority for us, and really how these 3 buildings related to each other. And so this is just a quick early concept, some early concept sketches. The one on the left was really about this sort of cross-cultural complex connection right between the parking garage, the Hamilton building entrance, and this sort of new main entrance and how it related to the Martin building. And then the second was an extension of the North building's axes on the ground level. So those blue extruded boxes really extending to the south, and actually a physical extension of Ponte's main hall, which I'll show you about, and I'll show you in a second. And then lastly, the Welcome Center, which was sort of this elevated ellipse meant to be a simple form that sort of organized the site, non-directional, not declaring one side on the front or back. And this is just a ground floor plan of the project with the addition, the Welcome Center on the left and the North building on the right, and that sort of new extended main hall that connected the 2 to the south. This is, I will preface by saying we have very few finished photographs, and I apologize for that, but the world was closing down when the site was still under construction. So this is just a view of the recreated Ponte facade on the right, the curtain wall, and then the glass on the left is the extended main hall that's sort of sliding under the ellipse. And this is a view from from the new entrance of the Welcome Center looking down the main hall. And there were 3 large skylights added to the existing roof of the main hall. You can see them sort of in the distant background. And they really, they not only brought a great amount of light into sort of a really quite a long hallway, but what's great is that as you get closer to them and you get beneath them, you're sort of on axis with the Martin building, and you can see it sort of orients you to where you're about to enter before you enter into the elevator lobby. And this is just a before and after looking south. So so I mentioned sort of the idea of clarity and visitor flow. The Welcome Center's new public stair, the main public stair, also really tied into this quite a bit. And so this was just an early diagram that looked at the main stair and it creating where it's located. I think I'll go to this guy. Where it's located in the main hall, it connects not only the Welcome Center's main hall to the lower level, which was the expanded education center and conservation lab, but it also extended up. And I guess I'll just point here and plan to this diagonal. So it extended, I'm sorry, one more, to the event space on the 2nd floor. And this is just a construction view looking from the Hamilton Bridge link back at that stair. So really the central stair was sort of the pivot point or the central point between the North Towers that are through this glass door and the bridge link that was behind you. And I have to just mention one other very reorienting component of the project. Well, 2 actually. One was we added a complete bank or two elevator into the existing post-tension tower, which was no small feat. And then also, I think if you kind of squint, I don't know if you can see it, but that was the issue. On the left, on the before shots, there's these two sort of unassuming oak doors. One was to the restrooms and one was to the main stair. And so neither of which looked very public. So the other component to the renovation was to pressurize and really open up one of the fire stairs. And that's what you see here on the right, which is the new fire rated glazing. And it really orients a visitor on each floor so they can see sort of where they're at.
Stephanie, we have about 5 minutes.
Oh, seriously? Okay. All right. I think I will, I mean, you know, there's so many components to a renovation project, and much of which you cannot see. And I think that what makes it so successful is that you can't see all of that work, the mechanical systems and the upgrades. So I think I will skip through that. I have to sort of touch on the tile. Mr. Ponte used glass tile. There was over 1 million tiles on the facade that were directly adhered to the concrete. So you could imagine the issues with that. So our project actually didn't involve replacing many tiles other than the ones around the window replacement and some on the 7th floor. But because they dam had undergone some restoration work in the 2001, they really were going through their attic stock. So we did help them to find a manufacturer to make the tiles. Corning Glass was actually the manufacturer originally, but they now have focused their efforts on the cell phone glass. So they were not interested. And the church in Milan, a firm that was making the tiles for that was actually a completely different material. So in the end, what most closely matched in sort of the quality and the glimmer and everything was a ceramic product out of Germany. And so this is just us doing that. And lastly, I think this is sort of my favorite component of the project. And I think renovation projects, we all know, have a lot of unknowns and some are more fun than others. But I did want to credit, you know, I think our team, not even me, so I can say that, for the amount of research that happens in the beginning of the project and really what you can uncover in that research. So this is just a sketch that I can't remember, someone found in our office that shows this auditorium, this elliptical auditorium that was never realized. So it was right off the main hall. And so as sort of a nod to that, we created this elliptical garden in its place, which was part of the expansion of this lower courtyard. And what was nice about it is it faces 14th Ave. And so all the buses and the school children, bus loads upon bus loads arrive at the campus. And it really helps to sort of process all of these students. And it's kind of like an intermediary between the sort of busy 14th Ave and the lower Kemper courtyard that you see here. And then lastly, the sketch in the upper left and this model here on the left were also found, and these were sketches of the 7th floor penthouse. I think, rumor has it, and maybe Jeffrey will correct me, that I think it was supposed to be a bar or a restaurant, or maybe that was just a joke. But the museum really wanted to build additional gallery space on the 7th level. And so with these sketches, we could kind of interpret that these terraces were coinciding with these beautiful scoops of the facade. And so on the right, you see sort of a diagram. The larger component volume is the addition, and then a sort of smaller triangulated space is sort of a multi-purpose event space that spans or that has access to both of the new terraces. And I won't go through this, but there was a great lengths of detailing to make sure that this addition stepped back from the facade, because I think what was so beautiful about the facade is that from the ground, the crenellated sort of surfaces went to the sky. And so we didn't want to interrupt that with the addition. And these are that's the view from the multi-purpose space. And these are just the views from the new terraces. And I will end on that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Stephanie will get me back later for asking her to present this entire project in 15 minutes. Maybe Ben and Andrew, if you could jump back in here.
Sure thing.
Thanks so much to all of you for your presentations. If anyone in the listening audience wants to drop a question or a comment in the Q&A, please do so. We can all see it and we can respond to those as they come in. And hopefully, Stephanie and Ben and Andrew, you might have some questions for each other as well and can engage in a little bit of a conversation. I think one thing that I would just love for you both to mention, and it's like maybe it's way zoomed out, but it seems like in both of these projects, as it is the case, it seems with most existing buildings and the work we do on them, that there's a squiggly and uncertain line between what is considered to be important to change or to save and what's not. And I wonder if you could just speak a little bit maybe to like how that gets decided or who it's decided by. And if you have an example in the project. So for instance, I know Ben and Andrew at the library, the entrance, the existing original entrance was preserved almost in its perfect entirety. But that wasn't preserving that didn't satisfy the need to make the building accessible. So there's an interesting kind of conversation there. And then I think Stephanie, questions about sort of, again, the entrance and that one particular tube entrance that you mentioned, that seemed to be something important to keep, and yet another entrance had to be added as well. So somehow this question comes back to this question of entrance also.
Well, that's a great question, and it's something that we contemplate on all of our projects. Where is that squiggly line? On this project, we heard a lot from the community members, who for generations have been going to this library, and we spoke to people who are, older in years and have memories of climbing those front steps with their grandparents when they were kids. So there's a lot of that nostalgia that you hear just through community members. But then there's also just the architectural, nature of those spaces, and they felt significant. It's a pretty small project. It was only 10,000 square feet. But that sort of trio of spaces, the entry stairs into the building, and then the entry hall and flanking reading rooms, those were, really traditionally appointed kind of beautiful neoclassical spaces that we wanted to maintain. And we did reinterpret them. We did not put the same sort of Victorian era paint scheme back, or we put the same stenciling pattern back, but we put a different color scheme. So there was always this kind of, reinterpretation or representation of the historic artifact. And then what wasn't sacred, it just sort of came naturally, where we made the new building entrance, kind of cut holes in the existing building. That was all sort of back of house spaces. We knew we wanted to preserve that sort of beautiful curved window sequence. So it's just, it's a lot of iteration. It's a lot of question asking. It's a lot of presenting to clients and getting their feedback and reacting to it, and ultimately arriving in some place that everyone is comfortable with.
Let's see. I think, Jeffrey, you were along for this. I think it helps. It does help that I think along the way, every move we did was always sort of prefaced by, well, what would Ponte do? And I think sometimes it was easier to answer that than others. And I think that along the way, we always had a huge amount of respect for the building. So it was about really enhancing and bringing out what was really great about the building. And then, over 50 years, some parts of the building were so changed that it was pretty easy to say that, these floors have to just be gutted with a contemporary kind of approach, but always sort of going back to the way, the original lighting was intending, but in a sort of contemporary way. I'm not sure I'm answering your question, but you're muted, but keep going.
You're muted. I need a t-shirt that says that. So I can just look at myself and see. That's an interesting point you're raising, Stephanie, and it makes me think about another question, which is one project's a library, one project's a museum. They're on opposite ends of the size in terms of them. They both happen to be a combination of renovation and an addition. The existing building in both cases seems to be more solid, and the addition seems to be more transparent. And both of them have a new elevator, stuffed inside them. And these are all similarities that I'm just seeing now, seeing these projects side by side. But I wonder if you could each speak to sort of it doesn't have to be the most significant motivating factor, but as far as like how people want to use the building and how that has changed since its original construction. And Ben and Andrew, you shared photos, even prior to the original library. I mean, you kind of give a history of the place as if you're participating in this long history. And we know that the way people use these facilities and the programs is changing constantly. And that in a way, architecture is trying to both keep up with and predict how that change is going to continue. And I wonder if you could each kind of like parse that out a little bit in terms of the program and the use and what kinds of programmatic motivations were present and how they got sort of realized in the work.
Yeah. So I think that was a huge part of the library. The library staff were very forward thinking and had been ready for modernization, and like a modern library is a kind of common topic of discussion in architectural community as well. And the idea of having a community space in the library, having a maker space, having access to computers, that was all like on the to-do list for the library. So we were really teed up for that, but we were ready to explore all of these things, and I think we did work through all of that program with them really well, and try to kind of create that space as they imagined it, but also as we imagined in the future of the library, and how it could be flexible for that continued change that the previous design didn't quite allow for like 100-year change.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't come to a surprise that the library model of 1909 is very different than the one today. We often make the analogy that libraries, used to be like a grocery store. You would go there, you would grab your goods, and you'd go home and consume them. And now we say libraries are the kitchen, right? You go there and you want to make, you want to gather, you want to be with your community. So creating those types of spaces, not just for the consumption of, literature or information, but the kind of gathering of your community was huge. And one of the things that we didn't really talk about, but that the community really wanted, was a community space that they could use after the functional library had closed for the day. So library closes at 6, a community group wants to host an event or a meeting. Like, how do you do that? There's not really many venues for that in the community. So we designed the addition at one point larger so it could sort of stand alone and function as its own kind of pavilion and have event space in it. Kind of shrunk in size, and we kind of put that thing down in the lower level, and paired it with the sort of informal gathering space in the entry. And we designed that in such a way where that could function independently of the library after hours. And that was kind of a, little, problem to solve just from a security and access perspective. But that was a huge part of the community's vision for their renovated library.
This is it again. There's so many sub stories to the program question you have, Jeffrey. But I think the two interesting ones, in my opinion, was the Denver has such an amazing educational program. I mean, I think they've, the backpack program, when you go to a museum and you get a backpack, they originated that. So their educational program is pretty much top of in the country. And so a lot of it was about reusing some of the, just some of the unrealized space in the towers to really expand their education program. And then I think the stair component was really important because people are very healthy in Denver and they couldn't find the stair. And that was really, it was really bothering them that they couldn't find the stairs. And then lastly, I'll just add similarly to what Ben mentioned, one of the biggest programmatic challenges of the project was to find an event space that was 600, it would seat 650 people like 3 times a year. And so I didn't get into this because that's a whole nother lecture, but
we were only after 40 or 50 people in an event setting, so a little different scale, but
yeah, but I mean, it's a lot
similar
of
challenge.
Yeah, it's a lot of square footage, and the master plan had it on the ground floor, which was really odd because it just killed the plaza and it was really, big. And so we elevated it and also designed this movable walls so that like the museum could use a majority of the space, 350 days a year, and then that wall could open up and they could host. So I think those are some of the big programmatic drivers.
I don't know if you guys have any questions for each other. My last kind of question for you was, Ben, you noted that there's a Carnegie model, right? And that this is sort of one of a series of hundreds, if not thousands, of similar type situated libraries across the country. Even though in each community, each one is distinct and special. And then Stephanie, you noted that the North Building is Gio Ponti's sort of a cult architectural figure of the 60s and 70s. From Italy, this was his only building in the United States. And you could also say that in a way, the Carnegie model and the West End Branch even exhibit kind of regularly occurring qualities of that kind of building. Whereas again, the Ponti building is like eccentric on almost all counts. And so I wonder if you could each sort of talk about that and how you think about working with an existing building that is unique in some regards, or generic in other regards. That'd be wonderful to hear. It's not exactly fair because again, the Carnegie in each community is still a really unique building in that community. It's not as much. It's not a real background kind of building in the way that we would understand it. But it'd be great to hear some thoughts about how you approach the uniqueness question.
Sure. You want to go first, Stephanie?
Not really, but I could.
need to think about it for a little bit.
I need to think about this one too.
All right.
I think it is a little bit about kind of like the first question. I mean, it's a lot of like exploration and figuring out what is unique in terms of this generic model. Like what is unique in today's times? Maybe it wasn't unique at the time. I mean, even the neoclassical design of the existing building is antiquated, but at the time it was quite modern, ironically. And so like trying to work through complementing that was really fun. I mean, you really get into the nitty gritty of all of that, looking for like where the limestone bands are and how you complement that in a modern contemporary design.
Yeah, we should say that this project is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, West Branch. So neglected to mention that, but that was a very important, obviously, factor in how we approached the design. And we knew, just given the nature of the building, its proportions, it's this kind of very handsome civic building. It sits proudly there. It's been there for 100+ years. We knew, just given its sort of stature in the community and kind of through the historic lens and having the restrictions on it and having to go through that approval process, that we would have, we had to take a sort of diminutive approach to the addition. Like the existing building, that existing, kind of iconic symmetrical facade, that still had to read as the primary element. and our new entry pavilion kind of had to be sort of second nature to that and complement it, but not detract from it. So, that was in the back of our minds. And then just given the site constraints and where the setbacks were and like where we could actually build and achieve the kind of most interior space, that kind of drove the building where it's located, paired with getting as much grade up from the sidewalk as we could to manage the elevation change, so we could get a lower level in it. That was, those were all kind of like big factors in how we kind of placed the thing and how its volume was defined.
I forgot my answer. I know what I was going to say. Yeah, the uniqueness of the Ponte Towers. I'll say this. I hope DAM isn't on the call. I think they know this, but the majority of the Denver city doesn't. It's a kind of a love-hate thing with the towers, because they're 7 stories of glass tile with very few, lots of windows, but very small windows because it's a museum. So it's got some nicknames like the Fortress or the I forgot, the Castle. We of course loved it, but I do think that because it was so unique, that the client themselves also really wanted the Welcome Center to be very open and welcoming. They kept saying like welcome, open arms, which is sort of where the elliptical glass volume came from, because it's completely different than the towers in some ways, and in some ways it's got some similarities. I don't know if that answered yours, Jeffrey. I actually, I don't know if we have time, but I had a question for Ben and Andrew, and I think you kind of answered it when you were talking about the national landmark. But what I find challenging with projects that involve, the community and lots of, like you said, sort of emotions and history, people that have grown, was there ever issues with sort of when you all wanted to do something a bit more contemporary, and were there a lot of people that were vocal about certain pieces they didn't want to lose? Or
Ben's very good at having those conversations, so I'll let him answer.
There were a number of those conversations. I mean, we talked about the kind of dual entrances a lot. Like we have the new accessible entrance that, anybody under any mobility, they can go there. But then there was a lot of talk about like what to do with the existing entry. Like that's still the entry to the original building. And a lot of people wanted that to remain the same, be able to enter the library that way. So we talked about that a lot, and actually both entrances now the existing one continues to function. We call the new one the main entry, and there's been a lot of conversation about that. But that sequence up the stairs and then into the entry hall, like you can still enter the library that way, and that was really important to people. Yeah. Stephanie, I got a number of questions. And I know we only have a couple minutes left. I guess I'll give you 2. One's process related. I was really intrigued with your solution to solve the kind of entry challenge. You talked about the center of gravity kind of shifting like kind of 180 to the other side, and like how you solve that. So just curious, like, what was that process like? How many iterations did you go through? Like, how was what was the client process and feedback like? That's one question. And then my second one is more technical. I was fascinated about these glass tiles. That's kind of remarkable, or ceramic tiles, whatever they are, and how you guys sourced them and looked at different manufacturers. I was just interested to hear a little bit more like how you landed on where you did. And it sounds like a technical riddle to solve.
Yeah, well, the easier one is the tile, believe it or not. I think it was just trial and error, and a lot of research. Some of Ponte's relatives were still alive. And so we did, that's how we found out about the church in Milan that was getting their tiles redone. But we also worked with SGH and Fentress, I'll have to say, quite a bit on that. So there was a lot of science involved. And actually SGH wanted to redesign a clipping mechanism instead of gluing them to the concrete. But I think it was just too much of an undertaking to wrap their head around, redoing the million tiles over the next couple of years. But the process question is a little trickier, because I dare say that those first 3 concept diagrams were actually pretty effortless, like almost, I mean, the ellipse kind of came a little later, but the sort of extruded volume towards the 13th Ave as the new entrance and the extension of the main hall. That was, I think we might have even had that, the triangular sort of thing in our proposal. Like, I think that was from the very beginning, super priority, number one. And yeah, I don't know, it was, they were a fantastic client too. So I think art museum clients are very, they're very visual people. So it seemed pretty effortless. Certainly
Cool.
didn't look
That's-
like what it looks like today, but at first.
Yeah. Good.
Great. Well, I think well, I don't think it is 8 o'clock actually. And true to form, we will conclude right now. Thank you so much, Stephanie and Ben and Andrew, for giving us an hour and all the time preparation for this. And thank you so much for the work and the projects and the attention to existing buildings. And thank you all to all our guests who were able to join us this evening. Again, reminder, we'll continue again in 2 weeks on Wednesday. Now I'm missing the date, of course. Wednesday the 28th, and then on August 4th again. And those are also events to register for. So thanks again to all of you. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Cheers. Thank you, Jeffrey, for facilitating.
Thank you.
That was great.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.